Welcome to the fastest stop in town. Today on the Masechtas Beitzah Daf Chaf, we are going to begin on the very top of Chaf Abad Aleph, the second line from the top. Hahu Gamer, who's an individual, Di'ormalahu, he said the following statement: Habule Arba Miazuzi Laploni, that $400 should be given over to Ploni, and also Notziv Barti. Afterwards it says, marry my daughter. So Amar Papa Arba Mea Shakel, the 400 in fact is given over. Whoever brought the iboy notziv, iboy lo notziv. If he wants to marry, he could. He doesn't have to. They're not linked to the other. And Rashi says that this is mitzvah machmas misahoya. This is not just some stam individual. This is someone who is on their deathbed. And when it comes to even statements, we're usually going to listen to them, even though normally some formal kinyan is normally necessary. Fine. So, Taima di Amr Habale Notziv. The reason why is because he first only spoke about the money, then after he talked about the marriage. And that's the reason why the marriage is not necessarily linked. He originally talked about the marriage to the daughter, Habale Notziv Shakel, Lo Notziv Lo Shakel. Then, in fact, it will be linked. If he marries her, then the $400 is transferred. If not, not. Yosef Merema Bekarmelo Hashmais Mishmei Denafshe. So he said over this statement, Zarmele Ravina La Meremar, he said, Aton Hachamas Nisamlah. This is how you learned it. Anan Kidabamine Rish Lachish Rav Yochanan Mas Nisamlah. We learned it as it was said over from Rish Lachish Rav Yochanan. Tani Tani Kamedu Rav Yitzchak Bar Abba. And Pasuk says, Vayikrav es ha'oil of yaseha kamishpat. It says that you should be makrav the carbon ola, and then you should be done kamishpat. Now, what exactly does this mean? So Rashi says, Oilos yom shmini shimaluyim. This is referring to the 8th day of the inauguration of the Mishkan. Shehitol kosev al aron chayva liyoim kachacha egel ben bakar chatas. This is referring to the olas chova, the carbon ola, which was an obligatory carbon to be brought. And then it says, V'yaseh kamishpat, you should do it just like it's mishpat. So Rashi says, Ma mishpat amr ba'olas chayva. Just like when it comes to the oila, which is an obligation, al karcha kamishpat ha'maforish ba'olas nadava. What we're doing is we're linking it to the chiyuvim of the olas nadava found in Vayikra. It says, Shekol mishpatei oila v'shlamim Sham Namru v'Shel Nadava Dibur Kasav Dechsiv Adam Kiyakri Mikem. So if a person wishes to bring a carbon, the very beginning of Parshas Vayikra, Adam Kiyakriv if you want to, which is Mashma L'Kashiyirtze Yakriv. So the pasuk over there is talking about Olos Nadava, and over there it says V'Samach Yadai. It talks about the obligation when it comes to an Olos Nadava that a person needs to do smicha, as we discussed already, the resting and placing all of your weight on the animal, which is typically done right before the shechita. The asa hai kamishba dechsib oilos chayva lamed aleha shitain smicha kashar mishpah nedava. It's coming to tell you that just like the pasuk specifically and explicitly says that when it comes to the olas nedava, smicha is required, so too when it comes to olas chayva. So let's go back into the Gemara. Kamishpat oilos nedava lamed al oilos chayva shetiuna smicha. That's what it's connecting to. That just like by the Ola, the Beferish, it says for the Nedava it requires smicha. So since it says V'yaseh kamishpat, you should do it just like that law. So too when it comes to Olas Chol. Armalei Yarmal Lachmani, who's Rabbi Shamahi, the delay gomer shalmi chayva mishalmi Nedava. Now according to Rabbi Shamahi, he does not link the two, and therefore because of that, it's necessary for you to bring a pasuk to tell you that there's a chiyuv of smicha by an oilos chayva. The Beis Hillel kivandi gar mishal chayva mishal nedava. The Beis Hillel links the two anyway. So oilos chayva nami lo tiboy kra. So the fact that you would need to do smicha on oilos chayva, you don't need a pasuk for that. The gamri oilos nedava, because Beis Hillel learns it from oilos nedava already. So therefore, it must be that this whole drasha of this pasuk, that we need this pasuk to tell you that you must do smicha on oilos chayva, must be like the shita of Beis Shammai. So Mamai, the Beis Hillel, Shami chayva mishalmi nedav gamri. How do we know that Beis Hillel learns the two already together? Dilma ma'oilos chayva gamri, v'oilos chayva gufa boikra. Maybe the pasuk itself we need to be able to teach us this din. So ma'ishtam misham nedava deloi gamri shechein mitzuyin ma'oilos chayva mitzuyin. Because when it comes to oilos shalmi nedava, we don't learn it because it happens quite often. Oilos chayva nami gamri shechein kolil. When it comes to an oil, a carbon oil, as opposed to a shlamim, an oil is something which is completely consumed. So when it comes to a shlamim, it's mitzuyin. When it comes to the oilus chayva, it's something which is kolel. So we may not necessarily learn one from the other. El asim ibnei, we learn out from both of them. The sabri be'shami, shami chayva, lo boy smicha. And it's coming to tell you that only Beis Hillel requires that the shami chayva requires smicha, but maybe Beis Shammai doesn't require it at all. So Vasanya, and based on what we just established, we learned as follows. Amar Rabbi Yossi l'nechel Beis Shammai Beis Hillel al hasmicha atzma shetzarich al mash nechlu al tekel smicha shchita. According to the shita, no. Definitely, even Beis Shammai holds that when it comes to an oil chayva, smicha is required. The whole argument is, to what extent or when is it necessary for a person to have to do the smicha? Does it have to be done right before the shechita? So according to Beis Shammai, tekos ben shechita, Beis Shammai oimrim eno sarich. It's not necessary, which is why we said in yesterday's daf, you could simply do smicha on Erev Yom Tov, and then do the shechita a day later on Yom Tov. Beis Hillel oimrim sarich, Beis Hillel requires it, and therefore since Beis Hillel requires smicha, and then immediately after shechita, you have no choice but to do smicha on Yom Tov. So anyway, we see beferish that Beis Shammai doesn't hold, like what we said before, that maybe shami chayva doesn't require smicha at all. No, they definitely do require smicha. The only question is, does smicha have to be immediately before the shechita? So our answer is, who de amar ki haytana. The Sanya we learned, Amar Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda nechel Beis Shammai Beis Hillel al tekel smicha shechita. They don't argue about that, just sarich. That whenever there is a requirement of doing smicha, for example, by olos nadava, which the pasuk says explicitly, so definitely have to do the shechita afterwards. Amanechlu al hasmicha atzma. Shebei Shammai oimrim eno sarich, Beis Hillel oimrim sarich. The whole machlokas when it comes to olos chayva, whether there's a chiyuv of smicha at all. So there's two possible ways to understand the shitas of this machlokas. Either they argue whether or not you have to do have to bring it at all, you have to do smicha at all, or take a smicha shchita, which is what question 13 is. Beis Shammai oimrim maviin shlamim ve'in samich in the land. So b'may k'michli Beis Shammai Beis Hillel b'smicha de shlamim. So the question is, when it comes to shlamim, the question is, does he require? It says question 13. Certainly, oilus nadava do. But the question is by shalmi chayva l'chad man di'armin nechlu im teikav shchita smicha olo. So again, it's the question exactly what the source of the machlokas is. Whether Beis Shammai says that when it comes to shalmi chayva, you don't need smicha, or the whole machlokas is on I'll take of smicha shchita, but certainly even Beis Shammai holds that by shalmi chayva, as well as by olos chayva, you have to do smicha. Tanaban, mas b'hillel zakin. So you can understand this tension between Hillel and Shammai, because they argue whether or not you can bring an oilus re'iyah on Yom Tov itself. So the Gemara says the following. Mas b'hillel zakin shehevi oilasul azara lismoich leha b'Yom Tov. So he brought a carbon oila, which is the oilus re'iyah, and he was going to do smicha on it. So chaver of Talmidei Shammai hazakin amru mati v'shel behemazu. What exactly are you doing with this animal? Samul him nekevahi. It's not an ola. If it was an oila, you'd probably wonder how am I be able to bring this. No, it's a nekeva. A carbon oila has to be a zachar, has to be a male animal, and therefore the Beis Hillel were trying to stay away from this whole dispute and cause a big tumult. And all I'm doing is I'm bringing a carbon shlomim. I'm not bringing an oila. And what did he do? Kishkish lehem biznava. He started grabbing onto the tail as though to say, look, you can see it's a female. But of course they didn't look closely enough because in fact it wasn't. It was actually a zachar because he really was bringing a carbon oila. So on this, they went away. The fact that Beis Hillel seemingly agreed that an oil cannot be brought, so everyone started to agree with the sheet of Beis Shammai. They wanted to tell us halacha. One of Shammai's students, whose name was Baba ben Buta, he was a great tzaddik because even though he would obviously rather side with Beis Shammai, that should be the halacha, but he knew that wasn't the case. He knew the halacha was in fact like the opinion of Beis Hillel. Then oil can be brought, and you can do smicha on it. So because of that, B'sholach, as we continue to Chafam and Beis, he sent Behevi Koltzain Kedush B'Shalayim. He brought all of the sheep, says Rashi, Ma'ulam Hoyu, all the good sheep, Ba'amidan Ba'azara. And he stood them in the Azar in the base of Mikdash of Omer, Komi Sheroitza Lismach Yabav Yismach. Go and do smicha. So it's clearly to show that we pass like Beis Hillel that you can do smicha. Ba'isa hayom gaber yodin shel Beis Hillel v'kabel halacha k'maisan. The halacha was like him. V'lo hayisham adam she'ira b'davar klum. No one said a word. Shum masa b'talmid echad. There's another story. Mitamid Beis Hillel among the students of Beis Hillel shehevi olasul azar. Again, he burned the carbon ola. Lismach aleha to do smicha on it. Obviously, it refers to on Yom Tov. So one of the students on Beis Shammai's camp came. Armelo similar says Mazu smicha. What are you doing? You're gonna do smicha? I'm supposed to do smicha on Yom Tov. So Armelo Mazu shtika. What is this silence? Shasku b'nezifa b'holachlo. So he went like in a huff, and he went on his way. Says Rashi, shtika shahayilacha lishtaik ve'enach shaisik. You should have been silent, but you were not silent, and he left. So Amar Rabbi Hilchach, we see the Haisam Rabbanan. If you have a young Talmid Chacham, Diarmali Chavre Milsa, and someone says something, Lil Hader Be Milsa Tfei, you don't have to respond back. Mamai Diarmali Chavre Deihu Armale Mazu Smicha. He said, what is the Smicha? But Kama Hadule Mazu Shtik. He said, what is this silence? Tanya Omer Lehem Beis Hillel Beis Shammai. So Maba Makam Shasal Hedjit. So he says, my logic makes more sense. Beis Hillel says, listen, when it comes to a Makam Shasal Hedjit, when it comes to things which are not allowed, for example, as Rashi says on Shabbos, it's usher for some regular person to shecht an animal, but nonetheless mutal gvoa, you're allowed to bring karbanos on Shabbos, like the carbon tamid, the carbon musaf. So we see clearly if something is, we're more lenient when it comes to gvoa. So makam shemutal hedjit, in a situation where things are allowed to be done by a hedjit, for example, shchita on Yom Tov, inudin shemutal gvoa, certainly should be able to bring, for example, a carbon ola on Yom Tov. So amalahem Beis Shammai nedar medavas yachichu, that I will be able to disprove you when it comes to Nidarim and Nidavos regarding Yom Tov. Why? Shemutul hedjit, they are allowed to a hedjit, v'asal gvoa, but you're not allowed to bring them as a carbon. In other words, we see that Nidarim and Nidavos are not allowed to be brought, even though if you would have just regular chul and food, you would be able to shecht it for your own purposes. So we see clearly when it comes to Nidarim and Nidavos, that disproves you. So Amalahem Beis Hillel Mal Nidarim and Nidavos Shein Kvohem Zman. Yeah, but when you can't use Nidarim and Nidavos to disprove anything because there's no time. It's comparable to like a Davar Sheish Matir, and you could always bring these karbonos after Yom Tov. So therefore, we're not going to allow you to bring them on Yom Tov. When it comes to Olos Re'iyah, though, there is a set time. It's supposed to be brought on Yom Tov. So therefore, how could you tell me it shouldn't be done? Now, okay, fine. When it comes to the Davos, I agree. You're not going to bring them on Yom Tov, but it's because they're not connected to Yom Tov itself. However, when it comes to the Osri is directly connected to the Yom Tov. It's not true. When it comes to the Osri, you don't have to bring it on Yom Tov. Did not. That if you didn't bring it on the first day, you can bring it any time during Sukkot, for that matter, even on Sheminat Atzeres. Okay, but there is a set time linked to Sukkot. Did not. That let's say the holiday completely passes, then you're not Chai B'Achrayus, which means that you lost your opportunity. So therefore it is linked. However, the Darvin Devils have nothing to do with the Yom Tov at all. So I can understand the Darvin Devils not being brought on Yom Tov. Masha Enkin, when it comes to the Oil Sre'iyah, which is linked to the Chag, so therefore I should be able to make on Yom Tov. So I'm going to be Shammai, V'lu Kfar Nemer L'chem V'lu L'Gvoa. But it says L'chem V'lu L'Gvoa. That's supposed to be only on Yom Tov you're able to shech, to do things for your own purpose, not for karbanos to Hashem. That's why an ola cannot be brought. Shlamim can, because it's also there's an element of lechem. Anything. So him came out to lechem. So how does Beis Hillel understand lechem? It's not coming to exclude l'gvaya. No, you could bring an ola. It's lechem is lo kutim lechem v'lo klavim. It's coming to exclude kutim, non-Jews, as well as to dogs, that you're not allowed to prepare food for them. Abishol Amra B'Lashon Acheres. He said really the same type of a Kal V'Chomer, but he used it a little bit different language. It's Ma B'Makam Shekirtcha Stuma, in a place where your oven is closed, which means you can't cook. In other words, on Shabbos, Kira Rabcha Patucha. However, your master's oven is open, because on Shabbos, as we said, you'll have to shech and bring karbanos and bring them on the Mizbeach. So b'makam shekirtcha patucha, on Yom Tov, when you're able to shech for your own purposes, and adin shekirat rabcha patucha, so certainly you should be able to bring karbanos, for example, an olas re'iyah on Yom Tov. L'chein b'din shelo yehi shulchancha moli v'shulchan rabach reikon. How can you have a big full table of food and your own master has nothing? So b'may kamifani, what exactly is this machlokas? Mar savar in the Davos Karvin b'yamtiv. Mar Savar in Karvin b'yamtiv. So whole machlokas, whether or not Nedarim Nedavos are in fact allowed to be brought b'chlal on Yom Tov. Says Rashi, what is this mamai kamifagi? Abishol b'tanakama. When it came to these two lashonos, they seem to be very similar. So the only difference has to do with Nedarim Nedavos, because in the first lashon we brought this whole disproof of Nedarim Nedavos. Over here, not. It must be because Abishol is of the opinion that the Davos could be brought on Yom Tov. So therefore you can't have a question. Fine. Umar Savi Ein Kriva B'Yom Tov. Omer Rav Huna L'Divrei Ha'Omer Nedarim Davos Ein Kriva B'Yom Tov, which is really most opinions, that you can't bring it. That doesn't mean that, Midaraisa, really, it's acceptable, because it says L'Hashem, everything to Hashem, V'Rabbanan Hu Negazru B'Hu Gezer Shem Yisha, and the Rabbanan were just concerned that you may end up waiting, like we talked about with the Kalim, that are Tameh, from before Yom Tov. You can't be toivel them on Yom Tov, because you may just decide to wait and do everything when you have more spare time, more free time on Yom Tov. So that would really be Gezer Rabbanan, why we would not want you to be makrim the Darm the Delos on Yom Tov. Like you could have done it before. You're going to wait until Yom Tov to do it. El afil b'deraisa nami ulchazu. Really b'deraisa it's also not fit. The hashtei lechem the chayvus hayomnin who, when it comes to the shtei lechem which are brought on Shavuos, v'leikel migzar shem yisha, has no reason to assume that we're going to tarry, because over there we're talking about Kohanim, and we know that Kohanim is reason. So nonetheless, then the doichel is a Shabbos was a Yom Tov. When it comes to the shtei lechem, the breads have to be prepared before Yom Tov, before Shabbos, before Shavuos. Now, obviously, according to that opinion, it's because since it could have been done before, therefore it cannot be done on Yom Tov. Says Rashi, that Seres the Chayvus Hayoyim Hein the Einon Ruyin Lava Koidim Lachain to Gazbu Shem Yisha. We shouldn't be guys to that. Hayel V'Yachol La Fastim Erev Yom Tov. since you are technically, you can just bake it right before Yom Tov. Amar Rabbanan, it says in the Menachos, Dein Doichelos Shabbos, etc. That you're not allowed to. This is Befiyasan Delav Dumya the Chagigahu, Shizman Shchitasa Kavua Beregel. The Shechita is connected to the holiday. That's why it cannot be brought before or afterwards. Okay. Fine. Question 14. Mama matin melachem akosu beoichel nefesh de Yom Tiv u'beisham beis Hillel. So Beis Shammai says lechem is little gavoa, and Beis Hillel says it comes to exclude kutim and klavim. Okay. Iboilu. Fret the Gemara. With dibri ha'emer the dharma dabais in karavin b'Yom Tiv. According to the opinions that you can't bring these karbanos on Yom Tiv, let's say a person did it. You were not supposed to bring your neder on carbon, which was for a neder or nedava, and you did it anyway. The question is, what's the din? What do we do in that circumstance? Do we continue after you did the shechita with the rest of the avoda and do the zrikas adam on the mizbeach? So Rabbi Omer zrikas adam. A person is allowed to sprinkle the blood in order that it will then allow, because zrika sadam is a matir, and therefore it will allow the person to then be able to eat this carbon, because part of it again is eaten by the Baal, the one who brought it. So therefore it is connected in some way to lechem, because it's something that you're going to eat. Rabba Barhuna, he says a different thing, that why zerkas adam, you could sprinkle it in order that you'll be able to bring the sacrificial parts at night, because until you do the zrikas adam, you can't be makriv the imurin, the sacrificial parts. So my binayu, what's the difference in either circumstance? If a person did shecht on nedavos on Yom Tiv, you can still do the zrikas adam. So what's the difference? Binayu nitma basar or she'ava. Rava loizak rabba barav huna zark. The machlokas is, let's say the meat's just not around, it gets lost, or it becomes tameh, or something that you can't eat. So then, according to the pshat, that you could do this zrikas, you could eat it, so you can't eat it, but it's still able to do the hakarava of the morim on the mizbeach. Meisvei. So Gemara asked the following question: Kivsei aseres, when it comes to the sheep, the lambs that are brought on Shavuos, sheshachtin shalosh shman. Let's say when they were shechted, they were not shechted with the right intention, says Rashi. Shetzarich l'shachtin l'shem shalmit tzibor. You're supposed to shecht it for the sake of the shlamim. V'shachtin l'shem oilu, but instead it was an oilu. Or sheshachtin ben lifnei zman ben lachar zmanan. Let's say it was shechted before or after its time. Lifnei zman would be before Shavuos or afterwards. So it says as follows: Yizrok. So hadam yizrok, you can still sprinkle the blood. V'habasi yochel, you can still eat the meat. V'im hoisa Shabbos, but let's say this fell out on Shabbos, then lo yizrok, we do not want you to sprinkle the blood. Says Rashi Shir also lavashel with salos hayom, you can't cook it anyway. You can't eat from this meat. Lo yizrok. V'im zarak, but let's say a person did not consult anyone, he sprinkled the blood. He shouldn't have. He did it with the wrong intentions, and he ends up sprinkling the blood. As we continue to Chaf Aleph and Aleph, Kurtza, it's considered to be acceptable al manas l'hakter imurim l'erev, because at this point he will now be able to be makar of the sacrificial parts at night. Now im zarak, it says if you did it. So according to the second opinion of Rabbi Rav Huna, the whole purpose of why you could do the zrika is because to be lahakter morim, which sounds like it's l'chatchil. This is only talking about b'diavad, so it sounds not like him. Over here, we're talking about Shabbos. So on Shabbos, we will say it's more and more strict. Says Rashi, Achmiru Chachamim b'divreihem b'Shabbos mibi Yom Tov. Okay, we're going to stop there. Let's see a few questions. TA 25. Let's say a person instead of not doing it, over v'shachat, v'zarkas adam, you sprinkle the blood. Mashni atamim she'atiru l'Yisrael k'mar nafni b'neihem. So that we just saw. This is TA 25. Either it's allowed because in order to be able to almanas l'hatir baser b'achila. Alternatively, it was allowed almanas lahaktir imorim l'erev. And the daf gemina is if nitna b'basar o she'avad. Okay. TA 26. Okay, we'll see that on tomorrow's daf. TB 28. Elu beis devarim hasurim b'yamtiv matzinu shetirim legamri l'asas b'yamtiv sheni. Okay, since we don't have that question at all, let's conclude with Rabbi Giver's questions. I think there's only a couple questions over here. Shchimi Rashi Yomer 400 zuz l'ploini visas biti and marry my daughter. If he wants to take the money, does he have to marry the daughter? No. And he said, if, let's say it was the other way around, he wants to take the money, yes. Question this is the last question on this test. This is kind of like out of order. I wrote, if there's no kazayas remaining, we have a Kabbalah that if you started the dough, you can continue with it. Ad kan.